You think your soil is dead. Nothing grows the way it should, no matter how much effort you put in. You water more. You add fertilizer. You try to fix everything. But somehow, it keeps getting worse. And that's the part that doesn't make sense. Because the truth is, your soil isn't failing. Something beneath it is, a hidden layer, silently blocking water, stopping roots, and suffocating life from below. You can't see it, but it's controlling everything. And until you remove it, nothing you do on the surface will ever work. 1. Your soil isn't dead. It's being choked from within. When people see weak plants, slow growth, or dry, lifeless-looking soil, they quickly say, "My soil is dead." It feels like the only explanation. Nothing is growing the way it should. Leaves look tired. Growth feels stuck. No matter what you try, the results don't change. So your mind goes to the simplest answer. Something must be missing. But that's not what's really happening. In most cases, your soil is still alive. It still holds nutrients. It still has structure. It still has the natural ability to support strong, healthy growth. The problem is not death. The problem is restriction. The real problem is, it cannot breathe. Healthy soil is not just dirt. It is a living system. It is full of tiny, invisible spaces, like small pockets between particles. These spaces are where life actually happens. Air moves through these spaces. Water travels through them. Roots expand into them. And inside these tiny spaces, billions of microorganisms live and work quietly. They break down organic matter, release nutrients, and support the entire system without you ever seeing them. This hidden activity is what makes soil powerful. But over time, these spaces begin to disappear. Bit by bit, they collapse. Walking over soil again and again presses it down. Heavy rain hits the surface and pushes particles closer together. Poor soil structure makes it easier for everything to compact. Even watering the wrong way or letting soil dry too hard and then wet again can slowly tighten it. And as this continues, the soil becomes dense. It becomes tight. It becomes heavy underneath. From the surface, everything may still look normal. You might even feel a soft top layer, but just a few inches below, the story changes completely. That's where the choking begins. When soil gets compacted, those tiny air spaces vanish. Oxygen can no longer move freely. Water cannot travel smoothly. Roots hit resistance and stop growing deeper. And without oxygen, roots weaken. Without movement, nutrients stay locked in place. Without space, life slows down. So even though everything is technically still there, nothing is working the way it should. This is why your plants begin to struggle in ways that don't make sense. They may sprout normally at first, but then stop growing. They may look okay for a short time, but never truly thrive. They may survive, but never reach their full strength. And from your perspective, it feels confusing. Because you are watering, you are feeding, you are taking care, but the results don't match your effort. And that's where frustration begins. But the truth is simple. Once you see it clearly, your soil is not failing because it lacks something. It's failing because it cannot function. It's like trying to breathe in a closed space. The air exists, but it cannot reach you. The system is there, but it cannot move. That is exactly what is happening beneath your plants. The soil is not empty, it's suffocated. It's holding everything inside, but unable to deliver it. And until that pressure is released, until those spaces are opened again, no amount of care from the top will fully solve the problem. Because what your soil needs most right now is not more input. It needs space. It needs flow. It needs to breathe again. 2. the invisible barrier that's stopping roots, water, and life. Now, let's go deeper, because this is where the real problem hides. What makes this situation so difficult to understand is that everything on the surface can look completely fine. You touch the soil, it feels soft. You water it, it absorbs, at least for a moment. Your plants are still alive, just not growing the way they should. So, naturally, you assume everything underneath is also fine. But just a few inches below the surface, there can be something you never expected. A tight, dense, compacted layer, an invisible barrière. This layer doesn't form overnight. It builds slowly, quietly, over time. Pressure from above keeps pushing soil particles closer and closer together until they lock into place. And once that happens, it becomes almost like a wall. Not a wall you can see, but a wall your plants can feel. Roots grow downward, searching for space, moisture, and nutrients. That's their natural direction. That's how plants become strong. But when they reach this layer, they stop. They can't push through. So, instead of growing deep, they spread sideways, staying trapped in the upper layer of soil. And this changes everything, because shallow roots mean weak plants. They depend completely on the surface for water. They dry out faster in heat. They become more sensitive to every small change. But the problem doesn't stop with roots. Water is also affected. When you water your soil, you expect it to move downward, reaching deeper layers where it can stay longer and support the plant over time. But when this barrier is present, water hits it and stops. Sometimes it collects above the layer, creating a wet, heavy zone near the surface. Other times, it moves sideways instead of down, escaping before it can be fully used. So even though you are watering regularly, your plants are still not getting what they need, because the water is not reaching where it should. And then there's air. Healthy soil needs oxygen, roots need it, microorganisms depend on it. It is essential for life below the surface. But this compacted layer blocks airflow completely. No circulation, no movement. And without oxygen, the entire system slows down. Microbial activity weakens, nutrient breakdown becomes slower, the soil starts losing its natural balance. So what you have now is a soil that looks normal on top, but underneath, everything is restricted. Roots can't go down, water can't go through, air can't circulate, and because all three are connected, life itself becomes limited. This is why your plants feel stuck, not dead, not completely failing, but never fully alive either. They are surviving in a space that is too small, too tight, too restricted. And the hardest part is this: you won't notice this barrier unless you look for it, because it doesn't show itself clearly. It doesn't announce its presence. It just quietly controls everything from below. That's why so many people keep trying to fix the surface. They add more water. They add more nutrients. They try different methods, but nothing truly changes. Because the real problem is not on top. It's hidden just beneath, silently blocking the natural flow of everything your soil and plants depend on. And until that barrier is understood, it will continue to limit everything, no matter how much effort you put in from above. 3. Why everything you add is quietly making it worse. Now, this is the part that feels the most frustrating, because it goes against what most people believe. When your plants are not growing well, your first instinct is to help them more. You give more water. You add more fertilizer. You try new products, new methods, new routines. You become more careful, more attentive, more involved. And it feels right. It feels like you are doing everything you can. But if that hidden layer is still there, all that extra effort doesn't solve the problem. It slowly makes it worse. Because now, instead of supporting the system, you are adding more pressure to something that is already blocked. Think about what happens when you water. You expect that water to travel down into the soil, spreading evenly, reaching deeper levels where roots can access it over time. But with that compacted layer underneath, water has nowhere to go. It gets trapped in the upper layer. At first, it may seem like the soil is staying nicely moist, but beneath that surface, a different problem begins. The roots are now sitting in heavy, wet conditions without proper airflow. And roots do not just need water, they need oxygen too. When water fills all the tiny spaces in the soil, it pushes air out. So now, your roots are in a place that is wet, but suffocating. They begin to weaken, they lose strength, and over time, they stop functioning the way they should. Now, let's look at fertilizer. You add nutrients thinking your soil needs more. But remember, your soil may already have nutrients. The real issue is movement. When you add more fertilizer into a system that is not flowing properly, those nutrients stay concentrated in the top layer. They don't spread evenly. They don't reach deeper roots. They don't get processed the way they should. Instead, they begin to build up. And too much build-up can stress the plant even more. It can make it harder for roots to absorb water. It can create imbalance in the soil. It can even damage delicate root systems over time. So now, instead of helping, you are increasing the difficulty for the plant to survive. And here's the deeper problem. Because the results don't improve, you assume you still haven't done enough. So you add more water, more fertilizer, more effort, and, without realizing it, you enter a cycle where every action feels helpful, but is slowly making the condition worse. Your soil becomes heavier, your roots become weaker, your plants become more dependent, but less capable. And all of this is happening quietly. There is no clear warning at first, just small signs: slower growth, slight yellowing, less strength in the plant, until one day it becomes obvious something is wrong. But by then, the problem has already deepened. And the most important thing to understand is this: you cannot fix a blocked system by adding more to it. No matter how good the water is, it still needs a path. No matter how rich the fertilizer is, it still needs movement. Without flow, everything you add becomes trapped. And what is trapped cannot help. This is why doing more is not always the answer. Sometimes, doing more without understanding the root problem only creates more resistance. And that's the hidden truth most people miss. The issue is not your effort. The issue is where that effort is going. Because, until the path is open, everything you give stays stuck at the surface. And your plants continue to struggle, not because they lack care, but because they cannot use it. 4. The warning signs your soil has been showing you all along. The truth is, your soil has been trying to tell you this for a long time. It never suddenly fails without reason. Long before plants stop growing, long before things start looking lifeless, there are small, quiet signs. But most people miss them, not because they don't care, but because the signs don't look serious at first. They feel normal. They feel easy to ignore. And that's why the real problem stays hidden. One of the first signs shows up when you water. You pour water onto the soil, and it disappears very quickly. At first, this feels like a good thing. You think the soil is absorbing water well, but in reality, that water may not be going deep at all. It could be slipping through cracks, moving sideways, or escaping before it reaches the root zone. So even though you water often, the deeper soil stays dry. Then, sometimes, the opposite happens. You water the soil, and the water just sits there. It pools on the surface longer than expected, taking too much time to sink in. This is another signal. It means the soil below is too tight, too compact for water to pass through easily. So now you have two confusing situations. Sometimes water disappears too fast. Sometimes it stays too long. Both are signs of the same problem. A broken flow beneath the surface. Another clear sign appears when you dig. If you take a small tool or even your hand and go a little deeper, you may notice something important. The top layer feels soft and loose, but just below that, it suddenly becomes hard, almost like hitting a different surface. That change is not random. That is your hidden barrier. That is where everything begins to slow down. And then there are the roots. If you ever pull out a plant and look at its roots, you'll start to see the truth clearly. Healthy roots should grow deep, spreading downward and outward. But in blocked soil, roots stay near the surface. They form a thin, shallow network instead of a deep, strong system. This means they hit something and could not go further. So they stayed where they could survive. And that survival comes with a cost. Shallow roots dry out faster. They depend more on frequent watering. They cannot access deeper nutrients, so the plant becomes weaker over time, even if it looks fine in the beginning. You may also notice another pattern. Your plants start well. They sprout. They grow a little. They seem okay at first, but then they stop improving. They don't die immediately, but they don't thrive either. They just stay stuck. That stuck feeling is one of the biggest signs, because it tells you something is limiting growth from below. Not something missing, but something blocking. And here's what makes it even more important to understand. These signs don't usually come all at once. They appear slowly. A little change in water behavior, a slight hardness below the surface, a small weakness in root growth. Individually, they don't seem like a big problem, but together, they tell a clear story. Your soil is trying to function, but something is holding it back. And the longer these signs are ignored, the stronger that hidden barrier becomes. The harder it gets, the more it controls everything. That's why awareness changes everything. The moment you start noticing these signals, you stop guessing. You stop adding more blindly. And you begin to understand what your soil has been quietly showing you all along. Because the soil always speaks. Not with words, but through patterns. Through water, through roots, through growth. And once you learn to see those patterns, you stop treating the surface and finally begin to understand what's happening underneath. 5. Break the hidden layer and watch your soil come back to life. This is the moment where everything begins to change, not by adding more, but by removing what has been holding everything back. Once you understand that the real problem is the hidden layer beneath your soil, your approach shifts completely. You stop trying to fix the surface, and you start focusing on what's underneath. Because the truth is simple. The moment that compacted layer begins to break, even slightly, the entire system starts to wake up again. At first, the change may not look dramatic. You won't see instant results overnight. But something important begins to happen below the surface. Water starts moving differently. Instead of sitting on top or escaping too quickly, it begins to travel deeper. It reaches places it couldn't reach before. It stays longer where the roots can actually use it. And slowly, the soil begins to hold moisture in a more balanced way. Not too much, not too little, just enough to support steady growth. Then come the roots. This is where the real transformation begins. When that barrier is no longer blocking them, roots finally find space. They push downward. They expand naturally. They explore deeper layers of the soil that were once unreachable. And as they grow deeper, they grow stronger. Stronger roots mean stronger plants. Plants that don't depend only on the surface. Plants that can handle heat better. Plants that can survive longer without constant watering. You begin to notice a quiet confidence in your plants. They don't struggle the way they used to. They respond. They adapt. They grow with more stability. And then, something even more powerful happens. the life inside your soil returns. Those tiny organisms that were once struggling in tight, airless conditions begin to recover. With more space and better airflow, they become active again. They start breaking down organic matter. They start releasing nutrients. They start rebuilding the natural balance of the soil. And all of this happens without you forcing it, because once the pathway is open, nature knows exactly what to do. This is the part most people never experience, because they keep adding more from the top without ever removing the block below. But when you finally break that hidden layer, you realize something important. Your soil was never empty. It was never truly weak. It was simply restricted. And once that restriction is gone, everything that was already there begins to work again. Growth becomes easier. Leaves look healthier. Plants stand stronger. Progress feels natural instead of forced. You stop fighting the soil and start working with it. And that's the real shift. You move from control to understanding, from effort to flow. Because now you are no longer trying to fix symptoms. You have removed the cause. And once the cause is gone, the system heals itself. That's the quiet power of this lesson. Sometimes the biggest change doesn't come from adding something new. It comes from removing the one thing that was stopping everything. And when you do that, you don't just improve your soil, you bring it back to life. So, before you walk away thinking your soil has failed you, pause for a moment. Because what you've seen today changes everything. Your soil was never the enemy. It was never empty. It was never truly dead. It was simply blocked. Blocked from breathing. Blocked from flowing. Blocked from doing what it was naturally designed to do. And once you understand that, your entire approach shifts. You stop chasing quick fixes. You stop adding more without purpose. You stop fighting the surface. And instead, you begin to look deeper. Because real growth does not come from what you keep adding on top. It comes from what you allow to move underneath. The air your soil needs is already there. The water your plants depend on is already there. The nutrients your soil holds are already there. They've been there the whole time. They just couldn't move. They couldn't reach. They couldn't work together. But the moment you remove that hidden block, everything begins to connect again. The soil starts to breathe. The roots start to explore. The water starts to flow the way it should. And growth no longer feels forced. It feels natural. It feels steady. It feels alive. That is the difference between struggling soil and living soil. Not more effort, not more products, just one simple shift. Remove the block and let the system work. So the next time you look at your soil and feel like nothing is working, don't rush to add more. Look deeper, because the answer isn't always on the surface. Sometimes it's just waiting beneath it. And once you clear the path, you won't just grow better plants. You'll finally understand what your soil has been trying to tell you all along.